Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're cracking open the MPEP again.
Yep, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, that hefty guide.
Exactly, and this time we're zooming into Chapter 1800. That takes us into the whole international side of things, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, or PCT.
Right, international application.
And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to, well, get into the weeds of MPP Section 1876 and its close companion, Section 1876.01.
Yeah, these sections deal with how the IPE, that's the International Preliminary Examining Authority, handles obvious errors and informalities in PCT applications.
Those little mistakes that inevitably creep in. So we're figuring out the official process for fixing them during the international phase.
Precisely. And, this isn't just theoretical stuff. These sessions lay out very specific step-by-step procedures. It's practical.
And it's part of our bigger series, right? Going through the MPP section by section.
That's the plan. Trying to make this massive document a bit more digestible for, students, practitioners, anyone studying for the patent bar exam.
And all our info today comes straight from those MPP sections themselves.
Correct. Source material is key here.
Definitely. And before we dive deeper, a huge thank you, as always, to Mike Shepard, our creative director. He's the one organizing this whole MPP audio exploration.
Absolutely. Big thanks to Mike. Now, very important disclaimer time.
Yes, the necessary heads up.
So this summary we're discussing, it was put together using AI tools like ChatGPT and Notebook LM. And while we've aimed for accuracy, there's always a chance of errors or omissions.
So treat this as, what, general info?
Exactly. General educational, informational purposes only. It is absolutely not legal advice. Please don't take it as such.
And it doesn't replace, say, formal instruction or actually reading the official MPP?
Not at all. For the real authoritative guidance, you have to consult the official MPP itself or talk to a qualified instructor or, a registered patent practitioner.
Consider this your guidepost, maybe, but not the final destination.
Well put. Okay, shall we jump into Section 1876? Let's do it. MPP Section 1876, Notation of Errors and Informalities by the Examiner. So this is all about the IPEA's role.
Primarily, yes. It details what the IPEA and the examiner working there must do when they get a request from an applicant to fix an obvious error. And this is all done under the umbrella of PCT Rule 91.
Rule 91. Okay, so that's the specific PCT rule for correcting these kinds of mistakes.
That's the one. Rule 91 allows applicants to request the rectification. MPEP 1876 tells the IPEA, specifically the USPTO when it's acting as IPEA, how to handle that request.
And crucially, what happens if they actually authorize the correction?
Right, because if you, the applicant, spot that obvious typo or clerical error, you send in your request under Rule 91 and the IPEA says, yep, that's an obvious error, we authorize the fix, then things get very specific.
It's not just like they pencil it in or swap out the page informally.
Oh, definitely not. Think international coordination here. These documents have to be meticulously tracked. So if a Rule 91 rectification is authorized, the replacement sheets you submitted, they have requirements. Okay, what kind of requirements?
First, they have to be indelibly marked, upper right-hand corner.
Indelibly, okay. What goes in the marking?
Two things. The international application number and the date that specific replacement sheet was received by the authority.
Application number, date received, top right. Got it. That helps identify it. But you said there was more?
Yep. There's another marking, middle of the bottom margin this time, also indelible.
Bottom middle. What does that one say?
This one reads, Rectified Sheet, Rule 91. Or if the demand was filed in, say, French, the equivalent phrase in French.
Okay, so it clearly flags it as a corrected sheet under the rule.
Exactly. And it also has to indicate which international preliminary examining authority authorized the change. Could be the USPTO, could be the European Patent Office, etc.
Wow. So anyone looking at that sheet, anywhere in the world, knows exactly what it is, why it was changed, and who okayed it.
That's the goal. Standardization is key for the PCT system to function across borders. It avoids chaos in tracking changes, creates a clear global record.
That makes sense. So they mark the sheets. What else does the IPEA have to do once they've authorized the change? Do they just file it away?
No, there are documentation and transmission duties too. First, the IPEA has to keep copies of everything relevant, the original sheets being replaced, the applicant's letter requesting the fix, and, of course, the newly marked replacement sheets.
Keep your own records straight.
Right. And then they have to transmit copies of the request letter and those authorized replacement sheets to two places.
Okay, who gets copies?
the International Bureau, the IB in Geneva, and also back to the applicant.
Ah, so the central PCT authority and the person who asked for the change both get the official corrected version.
Precisely. The IB needs it for publication and maintaining the master file, and the applicant needs it for their records and potentially for national phase entry later.
And you mentioned something earlier about related transmission steps, maybe involving the receiving office?
Yeah, that's also part of Rule 91, often happening a bit earlier. When the applicant first submits the request, the receiving office, or sometimes the ID itself, would typically transmit that request letter and the proposed replacement sheets to the IB and maybe the International Searching Authority, along with the main record copy. So there's this chain of transmission ensuring the correction gets logged correctly throughout the system.
It sounds like a well-defined paper trail, or maybe digital trail these days.
It has to be. Okay, so that's the process when the IPEA authorizes the fix, but what if they don't? Or more specifically, what if the correction is requested, but it's just not considered for the main report? The MPE mentions Rule 66.4 buys.
Right, Rule 66.4 buys. What's the story there?
This is a really critical point. Rule 66.4 bis deals with situations where amendments, or these Rule 91 rectifications, are filed after the ITA has already started drafting the big opinion, the International Preliminary Examination Report.
So it arrives too late to be factored into the examiner's final opinion on patentability.
Essentially, yes. If the IPA gets your Rule 91 request too late for that report, they handle the harking differently.
How so? Does it still get marked as rectified?
It does, but with a crucial addition. Instead of just rectified sheet, Rule 91 at the bottom, it gets marked. Rectified sheet, Rule 91, not considered for report, Rule 66.4 bis.
Ah, okay, so it signals loud and clear. Yes, this correction was filed under Rule 91, but don't look for its impact in this specific IPEA report.
Exactly. It manages expectations and clarifies the status of that sheet relative to the examination opinion.
Did that mean filing it late was pointless? Is the correction just ignored then?
Not necessarily ignored by the system as a whole, but it won't change the IPEA's report, which is a key document. But the MPEP clarifies that even in this not considered scenario, the IPEA still follows procedure.
What procedure is that?
They still inform the relevant offices, the IB, the national offices eventually, and the applicant about the requested rectification and the fact it wasn't considered for the report.
So the attempt to correct is still on the record?
Yes. The official file still shows you tried to make that correction under Rule 91, even if it missed the boat for the IPEA report. And that could still be relevant later, maybe when you enter the national phase in individual countries.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift focus slightly within 1876. What about the examiner's role? Are they supposed to be actively hunting for typos?
That's a common question, and the MPP gives a clear answer in 1876. Examiners are not primarily responsible for actively searching for mistakes.
So you shouldn't rely on them to proofread your application?
Absolutely not. Their main job is examining for patentability, novelty, inventive step, industrial applicability.
What if they just happen to notice an obvious error while they're doing that examination?
Then they may note it. It's discretionary, and if they do note an obvious error, they may invite the applicant to correct it using Rule 91.
May invite, so it's not guaranteed they'll point it out.
Not guaranteed at all. But if they choose to extend that invitation, there's a specific form they use.
Of course there's a form. Which one?
Form PCT 401. That's the official, hey, applicant, I spotted what looks like an obvious error. You might want to consider filing a Rule 91 rectification form.
Form 401 for the invitation. What if the examiner sees something wrong, but it's maybe not obvious enough for Rule 91, or just some other minor informality?
Good question. For those kinds of issues, errors not meeting the strict obvious standard or other minor things, the examiner may note them somewhere else.
Where's that?
In box 7 of a different form. Form PCT 408. This isn't an invitation like Form 411. It's more like an observation noted for the record.
Okay. Form 411 for the invitation to fix obvious errors. Box 7, the Form 408 for other notes. And I think the MPP mentioned something about who can sign these.
It did. It's a small point, but it underscores the formality. Only examiners who have at least partial signatory authority within the IPEA are allowed to sign Forms 411 and 408.
So it needs a certain level of authority to make these official communications about errors.
Precisely. It carries the weight of the IPEA.
Right. That gives us a really good handle on MPP 1876, identifying errors, the examiner's optional role, marking authorized changes, dealing with late ones, transmitting copies. Now, what about Section 1876.01? How does that fit in?
It's the logical next step. Section 1876.01 is all about the notification of the decision. Once you, the applicant, have submitted your Rule 91 request and the IPEA has reviewed it and made up its mind, how do they tell you?
Ah, the response mechanism.
Exactly. This section details how the IPEA formally communicates its decision yay or nay back to the applicant.
And let's just quickly refresh, what kind of obvious errors are we talking about again that an applicant might request to fix under Rule 91?
Sure. It covers obvious errors in the description, the claims, or the drawings. It can also cover obvious errors in amendments you might have already filed, either Article 19 amendments after the search or Article 34 amendments during this preliminary examination phase.
And the key word is obvious, right? Like it has to be clear what the correction should be.
Absolutely key. It must be obvious from the application itself or maybe related documents what the intended text or drawing was. You can't use Rule 91 to sneak in new information or subject matter. That's a big no-no.
Got it. So I find an obvious typo in my claims. How do I actually ask the IPEA to fix it under Rule 91? What do I need to send them according to 1876.01?
MPEP 1876.01 confirms this. You need to submit replacement sheets for the pages containing the error. So new claim sheets in your example.
Just the replacement sheets.
No, critically, you also need to include a letter. And that letter has to clearly explain the differences between the original sheets you want replaced and the new replacement sheets you're providing.
So the examiner can easily see exactly what changed and why you think it's an obvious error.
Precisely. It makes the review process much smoother.
Okay, replacement sheets plus the explanation letter. The IPEA gets this package, they review it, make a decision. How do they respond? Is it just like a letter back?
It's a specific form. Remember, PCT loves its forms for standardization.
Yes. Another form number incoming.
You got it. For responding to a Rule 91 request, the IPEA must use Form PCT 412.
Form 412. Okay, and what's the core message on that form?
Its main job is to clearly communicate the IPEA's determination. Does it authorize the rectification you requested under Rule 91, or does it refuse it? The form will explicitly state the decision.
Authorization or refusal. Clear cut. What if the reason for refusal is complicated, or maybe they authorize it but with some caveats? Is there space for explanation?
Yes, the form itself has space for reasons. But importantly, if the explanation needs more room, especially for a refusal, where understanding the reasoning is vital for the applicant, the MPEP explicitly allows for supplemental sheets to be attached to Form 412.
So they can provide a full explanation if needed.
They should, yes. The goal is clarity for the applicant about why the decision was made.
Okay, so pulling back a bit, MPP 1876 lays out the internal handling, the marking, the examiner's role, the transmission. And 1876.01 focuses purely on that formal communication loop back to the applicant using Form 412 after a request is made. These procedures seem incredibly meticulous.
They really are. And if you think about the bigger picture, why have all these detailed steps for markings, forms, transmissions? It's fundamentally about ensuring the integrity and clarity of the patent application document as it moves through this complex international system.
Handling human error in a standardized way across many countries.
Exactly. Imagine the mess if different offices marked things differently or didn't notify the IB properly. You could end up with multiple conflicting versions of the application floating around. These rules, strict as they seem, prevent that. They provide a predictable, structured way to handle mistakes while respecting the formal boundaries of the process.
It really drives home the need for procedural rigor in international law. So for someone listening, maybe a student, maybe someone working in patents, maybe someone prepping for the bar, why is understanding these specifics of 1876 and 1876.01 so important?
Well, knowing these details tells you exactly how to properly ask for a correction of an obvious error under Rule 91. You know you need replacement sheets and that explanatory letter. You also understand what the IPEA is supposed to do with your request, how they mark it if authorized, what happens if it's late, how they have to notify you using Form 412.
So it helps you manage the process, anticipate the steps?
Precisely. It helps you navigate the PCT system effectively. You know the rules of the road, essentially, for correcting these specific types of errors during the international preliminary examination phase. It avoids missteps and ensures your attempts to fix the application are handled correctly by the authorities. It's about knowing the constraints and procedures you have to work within.
It definitely paints a picture of a very ordered, if complex, system. Here's a final thought to chew on. Think about how this incredibly detailed, standardized procedure, just for handling something labeled an obvious mistake, reflects the sheer difficulty and necessity of international coordination when dealing with something as intangible as an invention.
Yeah.
It shows how critical, clear, formal, universally understood communication is when you're trying to manage intellectual property rights across dozens of different legal systems and languages. Every detail counts towards that global clarity.
A system where that clarity isn't just nice to have, well, it's baked right into the rules. Procedure mandates it.
Well said. And just as we wrap up, let's reiterate that important disclaimer one last time.
Right. The information discussed today is a summary generated using AI tools. It's intended for general educational and informational purposes only.
It is definitely not legal advice.
Absolutely not. For authoritative guidance, you always need to consult the official MPP, get formal instruction from a qualified source, or speak directly with a registered patent practitioner.
Please keep that in mind. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into the MPP.
Yeah, thanks for listening.